Thanks very much. Hello, everybody. And here you thought you got rid of me, right? Like, doesn't this guy retire or something? You know, I was surprised to get the phone call to come and say a few words about you folks, but God, what an honor. What an amazing honor to be able to do that. You're an amazing group of people. You know, you think you're here alone, you're not, you know. There's a whole lot of other people crammed in this room with you today. George Lister's here with the other delegates, first AGM, 1917. Mary Ellen Smith, the first woman elected to the legislature in British Columbia in 1918, a teacher. The first woman was a teacher. And you know what her platform was? Her platform was rights for women and children, and she passed the first minimum wage law for women and children in the country. That was her contribution. There's others here. The teachers who walked the picket line in Victoria in 1919. Not only the first strike in British Columbia in history for teachers, but the first strike in the history of the Commonwealth for teachers was in British Columbia here. You're going to debate pensions. The BCTF Pension Committee, 1929, lobbied for the first pension legislation that gave pensions to teachers for the next 100 years. Harry Charlesworth is here. His delegates at that convention decided that they were going to fight the Kidd Report in 1932, which wanted to cut teachers' pay by 25% and make everybody over the age of 14 pay to go to school. Over the age of 14. Hilda Siderman, 1954, with her delegates, in this room probably, or in another room like it. She's here today because she was the first woman president ever elected to this organization as president in 1954. And the courage of delegates. And there are thousands more with you today because there are thousands who sacrificed, who sweated, who struggled year after year to build this organization, who believed in their heart of hearts that a fairer, more equal, more just society was only possible if you have the best public education system you can have. It was connected. Who believed that solidarity was the only way that teachers were actually going to make progress and improve their lot in life. And I know some of you are saying, Jim, you've lost your mind, these people aren't here. The reason you can't see them actually is because they're really you. Your whole world goes back there and flows through you today. You think you were brought here to this room with planes and cars and sky trains? Actually, you were brought here by 100 years of history. And what amazing journey it's been. Incredible, difficult, inspiring, frustrating, uplifting. I almost use the word beautiful at times, journey. Do you know what you've done? So many incredible things. So many incredible things. I want to share a short time to touch on a few of them. Ever since this first school opened in this province in 1851, teachers have been walking into those schools and transforming generations of children and young adults. Millions of children and young adults have been transformed over the last 100 years. You have taught collectively millions of British Columbians the skills necessary to think critically, to participate in democracy, and to pursue further learning so that they can get the jobs and the skills necessary to raise their families and build a province. And you do it by respecting every single individual student. That is an amazing accomplishment for you. I often hear people who say the private sector creates the wealth and the public sector spends the wealth. And they say that a lot. And you know what they're really saying, of course, is that the private sector makes all the wealth and you just take it and waste that wealth because it's not worth it, really. The public sector is no good. But, you know, I think about that. Isn't millions of British Columbians with the skills to build an economy and participate in their community not the greatest wealth we've ever created in British Columbia? Isn't it? Let's set the record straight. Your sisters and brothers over the last 100 years have been responsible for the creation of more wealth than any other single group in this province. Because after all, aren't intelligent human beings the best wealth we can have in this province? And that's what you have done. That is wealth creation, folks. And like the clock ticks forever, it ticks forever. You keep doing it every year. The young girl or boy that goes to kindergarten this last September, by the time she graduates, 12 years from now, you'll have given another 1 million people the foundations to go off in a tough world and survive. Another 1 million. That is something worth celebrating. Thank you so much for doing that. From the very beginning, you had 2 things you wanted to do, and you had it all straight from the beginning, and that's why I love you. You said you have to go and fight for teachers, but you also have to fight for public education. Those 2 have never been separate in your minds. You know, Egerton Ryerson, one of the founders of public education, said it so well. On the importance of education generally, we may remark, it is as necessary as light, it should be as common as water, and as free as air. If total ignorance is bad and a dangerous thing, every degree of knowledge lessens both the evil and the danger. I've always believed that for working people, we could only realize our dreams with a public education system for our kids. You understood that public education was fundamental, a free public education system was fundamental, and it's been part of your DNA from the very beginning. 1932, the Depression. The BCTF represents about half the teachers in the province. The KID report gets written by a group of businessmen who decide they're going to solve the economic crisis the government has because they're out of money. Guess how they decide to solve that crisis? They decide that enough of this free education crap, 14, 15, 16-year-olds can now pay to go to school. Oh, and all that advanced education, only rich kids should have that, so let's cut off all the money to University of BC. We'll shut that down. Too much democracy? They recommended we kill all the school boards in the province. And last but not least, they said, cut teachers' pay by 25% so we can balance the books. Well, what does the Federation do? What you've always done when public education was under attack. You launched a major public campaign to defeat the report. Special Committee of Teachers, you love committees, this union. You do, and they do good work. Wrote a report saying this report was outrageous. You issued a special edition of the Teacher magazine. You know that magazine? You issued a special report condemning the report and calling for it to be rejected by the government. All that was missing in that whole campaign was the Twitter response, I think, and the Facebook page. But the fact is, leading the fight to the public was your union president, Harry Charlesworth. His statements went right to the point. This was not just an attack on teachers. This was an attack on the right of working people to send children to school. The report, he said, was solely in the interests of moneyed classes in the province and engineered as a calculated attempt to set up a class barrier as far as education is concerned. Led by the BCTF and the UBC professors, they defeated that report completely. None of it was ever implemented. And the good news, in the next election, the government was also defeated by the people of British Columbia who wanted the report. We could take a lesson from that for next May, I think. More than 80 years later, the same worldview exists. Today, what do you face? Underfunding, commercialization, privatization. The same people want to do the same things to education. And 80 years later, you're up for the battle. It is teachers who time after time again have sacrificed their paychecks to walk the picket line to win back class size and composition language that was illegally stripped from your contracts. It's teachers who are going to the Supreme Court of Canada finally to get a ruling that it was illegal to put those conditions back in your collective agreements and return those conditions to children, which was what all this was about. Thank you for that. You were admired from coast to coast for that fight and for your continuing fight. You've always been part of the broader labor movement. You actually joined the Federation of Labor in 1943 for the first time. Probably the first federation ever to do that as well in Canada at the time. You left in 1954 when it was time to either stay in the CLC or not. But while you embrace professionalism, and so you should, and you do a fabulous job at it, you also have embraced solidarity with other unions and working people in general. I remember any picket line I went to as a young trade unionist, there were always teachers on that picket line. In fact, I remember going to the postal workers. They had strikes every other week, too, for a time there. And going to the postal works, standing outside, it's late at night, it's dark, it's raining, and there's this guy named Chinosky and another guy named Rosen, and we're standing out there arguing about whether or not the PC Teachers Federation should join the Federation of Labor. No surprise to you, their position was, it wasn't left-wing enough, we're not joining. But you know what? You weren't a member of the Federation in 1983 when Solidarity happened and they tried to cut all our rights, but you were out there on the picket lines fighting for everybody's rights and leading the charge for the labor movement, and everybody remembers that. Thank you for that job, too. In 2003, you joined the Federation of Labor. You joined the Federation of Labor. I traveled the province talking to all of you. It was an historic moment. In 2005, you stood up to the government and the courts when you refused to end your strike. I got to say, I'll never forget that you have the vote to go on strike first, and then after it's ruled illegal, you have another vote to stay out on strike illegally. Now, who takes a strike for a wildcat? No one ever takes a strike for a vote for a wildcat strike. But here's even interesting. The strike vote for the illegal strike was higher than the other one. It was amazing. Higher than the other one. God, it was a proud moment for all of us in the labor movement, and you raised the bar for the rest of us. Let's be honest, I always struggled as Fed president. How do you get by the day one of the illegal strike? Usually we can last a day. You're into day 3 and day 4 and voting to keep going. So the rest of the labor movement had to respond too. And you set a new bar for all of us. Thousands of workers in British Columbia shut down their own work sites, gave up their pay, risked their jobs to stand together with teachers to fight for public education and your right to collective bargain in British Columbia. It was an incredible moment for all of us. Two images come out in my mind about that dispute. One, of course, is, you're taking, I think, the second vote to stay out on strike illegally. And the news reporters all head for the picket lines after the vote result comes out. And they go up to these teachers and they say, so, the BCTF is forcing you to do this. And they kept going around looking for their story. And this one woman says, young teacher says, what are you talking about? I am the BCTF. That is profound. The other one was when marching in one of the parades, as a woman had a sign on, a teacher had a sign on, and it said, thank you, trade unions. And I thought, boy, that made all the difference in the world to be thanked for what you did, for the solidarity, etc. But actually, really, it's working people in this province that have to thank you. For everything you've done for these last 100 years, for everything you do every day when you go to school, and you deal with the consequences of a government that doesn't care about public education anymore. For everything you do to support other unions. The solidarity has always been a benchmark for this union. I want to end with a short story. One of the most horrendous acts of genocide against a group of people was the creation of residential schools for First Nations. The consequences are still being lived with today, of course. Your work on reconciliation is critical to healing our country, to healing our province and healing our country and moving forward as equals. In 1967, our country was celebrating its 100th birthday. My friend Ben Euste was 7 years old. He was living in Waglisha, or Bella Bella as it's known before, and his parents went off to see about his brother who had been, he's gone down, he was a fisherman and his boat had gone down. They'd gone up to Haida Gwaii. During an early evening, while they were staying with their grandparents, government agents came and captured, I would say kidnapped, the 4 children. And they took Ben and his 3 brothers and sisters to Alert Bay to the residential school. For 7 years, Ben didn't see his mother or his father or visit his community. And during this time at residential school, Ben taught himself how to carve. And he would make money by going down to the ferry terminal in Alert Bay and selling his carvings to the tourists that got off the ferry. I met Ben. He came to the Union Hall down in the downtown east side 35 years ago when he was selling his art. My son went to school with his son at Franklin. I told him Thursday I was going to give this particular painting of his to the BCTF. He liked the idea, and he told me that today he's asked by teachers to come to classrooms and talk about his life and to teach art to Aboriginal kids in the high schools. So he was happy that I was doing this. The painting is called Family. The killer whale, and I'll get it. This is the painting. The killer whale was his father's clan, and the eagle was his mother's clan. And it's inscribed at the bottom, and it says, "Congratulations, BCTF, for a century of struggle to demand justice and respect for teachers, but also with equal resolve, demanding all children have the equal right to a quality public education, free from discrimination in any form. Thanks from the working people at BC." Thank you so much for everything you've done. Keep the struggle going. Celebrate your students. Thank you very much.